Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of What's Buzzing at Georgia Tech. I am Lacey Whedon, the Director of Parent-Friendly Programs at Georgia Tech, and we are excited to have you here. I know some of you tuned in earlier in the week for our GT Europe webinar, and we are excited today to have the Career Center with us. So we have Laura Garcia, who is the Director of Career Education, I believe is the title. I think so. And we are excited to have her share some helpful tips and information. I will be monitoring the chat, but we're going to wait to hold questions till the end because that's just the easiest for all of us as we flow through here. So, and this session is being recorded, so we will post it on our website tomorrow. If for some reason you do go back and look at it or refer to someone else in your family or your student, that's certainly good to do. But without any further ado, we'll get Laura to share. Laura, if you just want to, I'll send you live and then we'll share your PowerPoint. So there she is. All right. Thank you.
All right, let me share my screen. Welcome, everybody. Glad you are here today and you've joined in. So as Lacey mentioned, I'm Laura Garcia. I'm the Director of Career Education, the Georgia Tech Career Center. Hopefully you have heard of us before or your student has talked about visiting our office, though, I mean, I realize that not every student will come in to see us, but hopefully after you hear today's content, you'll encourage them to stop by, engage in our events, our resources, and meet with our advisors. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the Career Center. I want to make sure that you're fully aware of all the services and ways in which we can serve your student. I also want to highlight a couple of top resources that can address common, concerns that students will bring to us in the Career Center. Also, we'll talk a little bit about some upcoming career fairs, other major events where your students have the opportunity to connect with potential employers. And lastly, I want to talk big picture about what your student can be doing during their time here at Georgia Tech to make themselves as competitive as possible for whatever comes next, after they leave the Institute. So the Career Center is located in the Bill Moore Student Success Center. So if you came to campus to do a tour, well, I know admissions has moved its tours over to the Student Center, but previously it was out of Bill Moore. So we are located right beside Tech Tower and we're attached to the stadium. So I can just about guarantee your student knows those two locations, so they should be able to find our office. And the most common things that we'll talk to students about revolve around anything related to career, whether that's major in career exploration, what can I do with this degree, to who hires me, what kinds of jobs could I pursue related to this major or unrelated to the major. We facilitate employer connections through career fairs, on-campus interviews, other events, and we also manage the experiential education program, so co-ops and internships, both of which, when you register those as a student, go through our office. And we'll talk a little bit more about co-ops and internships and why students should register those with us. So here's a picture of who we are and kind of the three main teams that specifically serve students. So within my team, I oversee the undergraduate career education team that consists of our career development advisors and career educators. Our career development advisors see students of all majors, class years, and our career educators are tied to specific colleges and schools. They are currently attached to the College of Design, College of Sciences, as well as Ivan Allen College of Liberal Arts. Hopefully, as we continue to expand our team, we'll have a career educator for each college and school. But we have started with those colleges specifically to try and bolster up further industry and employer connections and partnerships. College of Computing, Engineering, Scheller, all we recognize they have needs as well, but we're starting with these colleges first. But we've got a great team as well as our graduate career education team members who serve graduate students specifically. We can talk with you a variety of different topics. And as I mentioned earlier, we do manage the co-op and internship experiential education program. Andrea Comsha oversees the team in coordination with two other members as well. So here are just a couple of the highlighted support and resources that we can provide for your students. So certainly we are more than happy to meet with your students one-on-one to talk about their particular career concerns. And I encourage students to not just think about us that second semester senior year, but to come in, visit us often, so that way they can check in and we can address any concerns that they have, hopefully earlier rather than later. We host a variety of different workshops and webinars on common topics like interviewing, salary negotiation, job search, resume. We do host drop-in hours every day of the week from 2 to 4 p.m. as well. So if your student calls you up and is very concerned about an interview they just got for the very next day, or there's some other, something that they need help with, just know that they can always stop by the Career Center 2 to 4 or schedule appointments through CareerBuzz, our online job posting board and career management system, and we can work with them through whatever the issue may be. We also have career peer advisors who serve as para-career professionals that offer that peer-to-peer advice, many of whom have engaged in co-ops, internships, or other professional work experiences, so they can provide that more peer-specific advice to others. We manage the All Majors Career Fair, which is in the fall and the spring, typically within the first 2 to 3 weeks. We also manage a few boutique fairs, but one thing that parents should be aware of at Georgia Tech is that there are a lot of career fairs, and certain departments will manage their own career fairs in colleges as well. So College of Computing, for example, had a career fair that was last week that they ran, but we manage the All Majors Career Fair primarily. We work with employers as well to do on-campus interviews. So when you walk into the Billmore Student Success Center, one level below, we have a suite of about 30 interview rooms that employers will come to campus and conduct on-campus interviews, typically first round and sometimes second round interviews with Georgia Tech students. We do offer a variety of different panels that we host with industry members and employers. We've got one tonight with several professional organizations talking about the value of co-ops and internships. It's on our social media account on Instagram if you want to check it out and share it with your student. We also offer career assessments. So if your student is struggling, trying to understand, am I in the right major? What are some careers that are tied to that? We can work with them and share some both self-paced assessments as well as some more in-depth assessments where they would come in and meet with us for an interpretation. So CareerBuzz, this is our job board. So all co-ops, internships, full-time opportunities will be listed there, as well as some other services. We do have a campus closet. So our campus closet is the opportunity for students to rent a professional suit or other dressy, business professional items to wear for interviews, career fairs, or any other professional circumstance. And they can check them out for free. We just ask for them to dry clean and bring that back. And for those of you all that have students that engage in GT1000, so GT1000 is a first year optional course, but I view it as an extension of orientation. It talks about academic planning, career planning, so on and so forth. We directly cover resume writing with students, give them the basics of how to engage with professionals through networking, introductions, all of that. And we really focus on that class because so many of our first year students take that. We do also serve alumni up to 2 years after graduation. After 2 years, alumni have the opportunity to engage with Georgia Tech's Alumni Career Services Office. So if you have a student that's getting close to graduation, if they don't have something lined up right away, please know that we're a resource and we meet with students both in person as well as virtually. So how can we help your student? Some of these we've touched on already, from resume writing to job searching, but we can help with a lot more than that. So salary negotiation. What sort of salary should they expect as a Georgia Tech student, pursuing a career in that particular industry? We can help them understand that information. We can also help them figure out, how do I go about negotiating this? We can assist with networking conversations, LinkedIn, career exploration, major exploration, again, anything and everything under the sun related to career. So CareerBuzz I mentioned earlier. So yes, absolutely, it is our job board. That's where all co-op, internship, and full-time opportunities will be posted. It has a lot of other features as well. Through CareerBuzz, they can set up appointments to meet with advisors. They can apply for those on-campus interviews that I mentioned earlier, and schedule interviews with employers. They can post their resume to be visible to employers, and all of our events are housed within this one system. And something that I think you could really help me and for your Georgia Tech student to understand about CareerBuzz is that CareerBuzz is not LinkedIn.com. It is not Indeed or Career Builder, any of those general job boards that are out there. Georgia Tech's career bus system is specific to Georgia Tech students. So employers are logging into this, posting this. This isn't something we're going out and kind of scraping the internet like Indeed.com and compiling a feed. So their chances statistically are much higher in ultimately converting that opportunity into a job, just because, again, these are cultivated opportunities specific to Georgia Tech. So co-ops and internships, as I mentioned, we manage the co-op and internship program. So students have the opportunity to register their co-op and internship, and we enroll them in an audit hour course that helps the student identify some performance goals that they have for that experience, to work with their manager in identifying these. We help them to set up a mid-experience check with their supervisor to get that feedback on how well they're doing and any areas for improvement, and then walk them through the rest of the experience, and they have a final assessment that they go through. These are tuition free for students to enroll in these. They keep students enrolled. Any sort of money that they gain through that co-op or internship, when it's tied to a course, it does not impact your financial aid. And this is a really important point that many students don't really understand. In particular, say if they're getting a summer internship. If they don't plan on taking classes over the summer, they may think, well, why should I bother registering this? Of course, I'm coming back in the fall. They don't necessarily see the benefit of doing this. But the benefit of doing it is, again, we've got some highly lucrative internships and co-ops that are out there. So if they register that, it will not impact their financial aid, or doesn't have the ability to impact that. These students, on average, that engage in these experiences make about $5,000 more per year in their starting salary. And some students aren't aware that many raises are based on that base salary amount. So if you start out your career in a slightly higher, starting salary, exponentially, they can make more money over time. On average, it only takes about one more semester to complete a co-op. It's also a great way for students to really build up their resume and gain competitive experiences after they graduate. And there are many employers that have a target of how many students that they want to convert from an intern or co-op into a full-time hire. So it's a great way to get in with an organization, and they may have the ability to convert that into full-time employment in the long term. These students tend to have higher GPAs. Again, you can have an excellent opportunity to earn money. On average, about $19, $21. It can go a lot higher, say if you're in computing, engineering, some specific roles like that. If they register their experience with us, it does show up on their transcript, and this is really helpful as well. Your student can cancel their housing if they're working 25 miles or more from campus, and we work with the student on that. And if the student engages in a co-op and they complete the 3 rotations, they can receive a designation on their diploma, and they may be eligible for additional co-op scholarships. So here are some of the highlighted resources that I mentioned earlier that I think are most helpful for students. So naturally, we've got a resume guide. It has several different resume examples and tips in it, one for each college and school. I would encourage you to encourage your student to read through all of the resumes, regardless of that student's particular major or intended career. All students have the same problem, as we all have the same problem of trying to position past experiences in the most professional light and demonstrate transferable skill sets. So I think when students read through the different resume examples and the way in which others describe their experiences, it can help them better understand the value that they gained in their own activities, as well as how to best, explain and market that on their documents. Big Interview. This is a relatively new tool at Georgia Tech. So this is an opportunity for students to practice interview questions online. They have industry-specific questions, also some commonly asked interview questions. What's really interesting about the tool, well, 2 things. Number one is we have a built-in AI tool into this to where I would have to take off my glasses for this particular part, but the AI will track, your eye movements, how well are you connecting with the camera. It'll also track the number of ums, which I recognize I just said and other filler words. So that way, as students are practicing, trying to hone their interviewing skills, you've got that concrete measure and ways to record, what you're doing well in some areas of improvement. They can also send these interviews to you. Say if you wanted to provide feedback, or others, they have the ability to email that out there, and you can even rate on a star scale how well students did. in different components of that interview question response. It has other tools in there, other videos to help students better understand what employers are looking for when they ask different questions. The LinkedIn University Alumni Tool, that's one of my favorites. So if you go to linkedin.com, search for Georgia Tech and search, you'll see a tab that says alumni. And you can filter alumni by a lot of different ways. So you could see what are the top 5 or so employers for students who graduated with a mechanical engineering degree, for example. You can also filter by, Georgia Tech alumni in San Francisco. What are the top employers there? What majors are represented? So it's interesting data if you start playing around with those features. It's very helpful for students that are trying to identify others to network with for potential career opportunities, or if they're just trying to explore what are people doing with my major and put in some other criteria. Firsthand and vault industry guides, that's another resource that I really enjoy sharing with students. So this goes in depth into a variety of different industries. It's got a case interviewing guide. So if any of your students are thinking about pursuing a career in consulting, that's a very specific type of interview that they will likely go through. If they want to break into alternative energy, for example, it talks about what is that industry, what are some key players in there, what are some other important pieces of information related to that. So another great resource is Type Focus. I wanted to be sure you were aware of. This is a self-paced assessment where students can learn more about their personality, their interests, their values, and their skill set. So this is what it looks like once students create their free account. It's got a great 6-step system that helps you to reflect on some of these core things like your values, your interests, your personality, and how they could tie into different career fields. It doesn't mean that you have to pursue, all of these things that are suggested, but it can help get the creative, juices flowing and identifying things that could be a good fit based on the way that the student is responding. So interview help, in addition to big interview, we do schedule mock interviews through the Career Center, specifically Career Buzz. Students are welcome to schedule a mock interview to practice with one of our advisors. So that way they feel more prepared, when they go into the real interview. And we also offer a program at the beginning of each semester where we do virtual mock interviews with employers from a wide variety of industries. So we send out a huge email to all students letting them know, here are all these days where you can come and gain that employer feedback on your resume, both in person as well as online. And we offer virtual mock interviews online because, again, we can tap into, a larger market than just those that are located physically within Atlanta. It's a great opportunity for students to connect with people working in their field or have, that industry experience. So again, just another opportunity to get feedback. So I always like to show this example on the right-hand side as well of kind of a typical path that students will engage in. And I wanted to talk about this today because I think sometimes when we think about career planning and when we think about career development, it tends to be very linear in nature, the way in which most people think about it, where you choose your major, you study your classes, you start networking, and you ultimately end up pursuing that very pre-targeted career path. But the reality for many college students often looks like this, where maybe they came into Georgia Tech and they have their major planned out and they have that plan chosen, but maybe they take a class and didn't do so well and decided to change their major, or they took an elective and go, wow, this is really fascinating. I want to pursue a career related to this now. They may learn about, a career of interest as they're going throughout their experience at Georgia Tech, whether that's a career fair, maybe a student group. But ultimately, there are a lot of different chance aspects that come into play when it comes to ultimately finding that next step after Georgia Tech. And this is where we could really use your partnership and help with students, because I think, again, so much of a student's path so far has been very prescripted and linear in nature. You spend 4 years in high school, typically, you're 4 years or so in college, but then you've got this big jumping off point. So it's not A plus B equals C anymore. You've got to engage in different activities to try and find what's a good fit for you, and also recognize that there are some internal and external impacts that will directly change potentially your career path. So thinking about COVID and when that happened, if you wanted to work at Delta, or a travel industry at that particular time, it's really, really difficult to secure job opportunities. So students have to, have that flexibility or had to pivot and adjust and move into different fields. And there are also other important factors that will impact a student ultimately what career they choose. And of course, family being an important component, maybe their relationships, they might have to travel with a partner to follow them for their job. Or there may be other things that come into play, from the economy to did the employer select them or not. So I bring all this up because sometimes we can give the best advice, right? But I really think it's families and close friends and other people that are important to the individual student that can influence what they do. And that may influence how successful they are as quickly as possible after graduation. So networking, it's a very intimidating term for most students. And if they don't see an immediate benefit as to, well, why do I need to network? Why do I need to engage in informational interviews or meet all of these people? That's where we need your partnership, because by engaging in these types of activities, this may result in them finding that career that they're looking for. And again, finding a job is not linear. It's not, if I do all the right things, I automatically get this job. There are some subjective things. Did you develop a relationship with who you were talking to? Did they like your personality? If they did, fantastic. They may pick you over a student with a 4.0 GPA. Again, all of the checks in the right box. But you've got to do some activities like this in order to ultimately secure many opportunities. Engage in experiential learning. That's another way for students to explore career paths and make sure they're on the right track. So internships, co-ops, job shadowing, part-time work, research, all are excellent opportunities for students to gain experience that'll look great on a resume, but also help them learn more about themselves and what may be a good fit for them in the long term. I also recommend for students who are exploring different careers, if they're thinking about changing a major, maybe take an intro course, sit in on a class, and excuse me, engage in research or projects. These are all great ways to, investigate different possibilities that are out there. So we do have a couple of career fairs and events coming up. I wanted to be sure we're on your calendars. Next week, we do have a virtual career fair coming up. So if your student is actively seeking a co-op, internship, full-time opportunity, know that it's coming up. If you go to careerfair.godtech.edu, not only do we have the career fairs we manage, but any other career fair we're aware of on campus, it's all housed within that central feed. We are hosting a Startup Career Expo as well on March 8th. And this program guide that you see over here, you can also find that on the main webpage. So if you go to career.godtech.edu, you'll see all of our upcoming programs. So we've broken it down into chronological order. So whatever is coming up next, as well as by topic. So if your student says, I want to talk about interviewing, you can pull it up and see when's the next interviewing workshop, for example. I also want to share just a couple of pieces related to preparing for a career fair, so you can help your students. Career fairs are very, very popular at Georgia Tech. I actually had a really fantastic email that I received. It was either yesterday or the day before, and it was a professor who I recently worked with, whose son graduated in December and was still struggling trying to find a job opportunity, and he finally agreed to go to one of our career fairs, and he actually got the interview. Talked to him on the phone yesterday because now he's trying to figure out, what to do with an offer and while he's still interviewing with other companies. So please encourage your students to go to career fairs. Yes, they really do get you jobs, and there are a lot of career fairs here at Georgia Tech. So your student has tons of opportunities to identify and ultimately secure job opportunities. So if you're working with your student, please encourage them to, get their resume critiqued and reviewed, to research those companies that are coming, to practice introductions. That's also sometimes challenging, trying to figure out how to best introduce yourself. What do you talk about? What do you include? And dress to impress. So again, please feel free to point out that students are more than welcome to check out items from the campus closet for free if they need to do that. I personally didn't go to college bringing a suit, so very common that college students don't have that. Now, do your research when you're going to a career fair or any sort of professional event. Try to understand who's going to be there. What is their business model, their mission? Who are their clients? Are they providing goods, services? Look up their job opportunities. What do they hire for? Are there any departments that they have that may be of interest to you? And think about what skills and interests overlap. The more you know about who you're talking to, the more that you can impress them. Again, and the better the conversation will be with the recruiter. So here's an example. This is a model that we share in a lot of different workshops and webinars of how to introduce yourself, whether it's career fairs, recruiters, any sort of networking event. The basic model is who you are, what you've done or are currently doing, and what you're excited about, some next steps. So our tips are to smile, state your major, your class year, and then walk them through your background and think about how can I have a solid conclusion or end on a question. This can incorporate classes you're taking, skills you're developing, internship, co-op, so on and so forth. And the focus should be on both the positive as well as the relevant aspects to your audience. So here's an example. Hello, I'm Hai Xiaofing. Hi, Xiao, I'm Maria. Nice to meet you. A student responds back, it's nice to meet you too. To share more about my background, I'm a sophomore studying business administration, and I'm taking courses in insert relevant coursework. Outside of school, I work part-time at Jason's Deli, assisting customers, helping with the cash register, and maintaining inventory. I'm getting involved in blank student activity where I volunteer on the blank committee. When I was researching more about Newell Rubbermaid, I noticed you have a brand marketing internship role open. I'd love to hear more about the position and what you are seeking from a candidate for this role. So note that specific piece that was incorporated into the introduction. I have worked in career services at 4 or 5 campuses now and interacted with hundreds, if not thousands, of employers. The critique of students is always the same. They walk up, they introduce themselves, and then say, what do you have for me? Or if they introduce themselves, they're talking about a lot of things, but the recruiter doesn't understand, why are you talking to me? Why are you interested in engaging in this conversation? So the more that you can help students understand those pieces, the more likely they'll be successful when they get to these professional situations. So let's kind of wrap up talking about how we coach students to think about their time here at Georgia Tech in order to be as competitive as possible for whatever happens after they leave the institute. So number one, absolutely students should be focused on their academics, and I encourage students to aim for a 3.0 or above for a couple of different reasons. So over the years, what we've noticed is there are some employers that set GPA cutoffs for certain job opportunities. In general, the bigger the company, the higher the GPA cutoff tends to be. It may be 3.5, maybe 3.2, maybe 3.0. 3.0 tends to be the most common GPA cutoff that I see. Now, it's worth noting, not every employer has a GPA cutoff. It doesn't mean that you can't get a job without a 3.0, but it is important to kind of have that number in mind. And for some students, it might be a little bit heartening to hear that, oh, just a 3.0. I thought if I didn't have a 3.9 that I would never get a job opportunity. No, that's absolutely not the case. It's one of many factors that an employer considers as they review your resume and consider you as a potential hire. And regardless of what students are majoring in, they will have lots of great career opportunities. Now, leadership, this is a critical component, and not every student feels comfortable with this, especially earlier on in their time here in college. So, but we do want our students to lead something. It doesn't matter if it's president of the ballroom dancing club or, vice president of the consulting student group. The purpose of leading something, it just shows students that shows employers, that you have aptitude, you have the potential to lead others. So please encourage your student to get involved in student groups, maybe community involvement, and they can lead from any level. It doesn't mean just president, vice president. They can be an active committee member, for example, and they need to have some sort of experience by the time they graduate. The students that I work with most often this time of year and going into summer that are struggling with, ultimately securing a job, a common factor that we see is they didn't have a co-op, they didn't have an internship, or some sort of research experience that they could leverage and show that they could take that experience and put it into a full-time role. I do recommend that they do one or more experiences before they graduate. It is also really important because this helps students test drive these different careers that they're considering and think about, is this really the right industry for me or type of job for me? It's far better for you to figure this out during your time in college than for you to figure this out later on. And maybe you have to go back and go into a graduate program, for example. Package this all up together. In addition to the skills they're gaining inside and outside the classroom from teamwork, equity and inclusion, communication, those other technical skills, packaged together, this is what will make your student a top pick for competitive careers in graduate schools. All right, so that was the formal part of my presentation. I wanted to leave plenty of time for any questions that you all had specific to your student, but just a couple of final reminders. If your student needs any immediate help, again, we've got daily drop-in hours Monday through Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. in the Billmore Student Success Center. They can also request advising appointments through CareerBuzz, and I always encourage students to connect with us on Instagram and LinkedIn. We like to share upcoming professional events, other tips, and relevant information for students. But thank you all for your time and attention. I'm happy to take questions. And I'll stop sharing my screen. Here we go.
Thank you, Laura. That was, you all do way, just so much. So I apologize. I'm getting ready for Sibs Day. So y'all, my brain is going 8 million places. So I hope you all know that there's so much that your student has access to and even 2 years after graduation. So definitely encourage them to take advantage of these resources because it will set them up for success and even perhaps even show them this webinar. It'll be on our website tomorrow. If they don't already know this information, it would be helpful for them to even realize all the resources that they have access to. So feel free to type any questions you have in the chat and we will ask them. One question we have, and we get this every time because it's a great question, is what's the difference between an internship and a co-op?
Sure. Okay, so a co-op consists of 3 rotations with the same employer. So think of this as work for an employer during a fall semester, come back to school, work in the summer semester, go back to school, and then a spring. So it would consist of a fall, spring, and summer directly with one employer. Now for internships, you could potentially intern up to 3 times or however much time you have during your time here at the Institute, but typically the internship is with different employers. Some return back, but the key thing with the co-op is that it's in sequence school work for a total of 3. So that's the main difference between the two. And I saw a question that came in that says, you know, a co-op doesn't have a tuition cost and they don't get credit for doing it. So the co-op does not have a tuition cost. Essentially, when you register the co-op through our office, that keeps you enrolled. We know that you plan on coming back. We work with the student and the employer again to identify those performance goals to make sure we're setting you up for success for that particular work experience. And it does show up on your transcript that you completed that rotation. Let me see.
So one of the questions I think some families know, but not always, is, you know, what's the percentage of students who get a job offer by the time they graduate, or maybe by the end of that summer if they're or I guess if they're depending on if they're graduating December or May. And then what's a typical salary on average that Georgia Tech students are making?
Good question. So the Office of Academic Effectiveness maintains the career and salary survey. So this data is published each year. It just recently, I think, was published in January or December for the previous cycle. But this will show you a lot of information from typical salaries broken down by colleges and schools. But it also gives you the ability to see what are some typical salaries offered in different industries. And I think that's very important for certain majors in particular. So let's say your student is in Ivanhoe College of Liberal Arts. If you are an LMC major, Literature, Media, and Communications, you could go into consulting, you could work in nonprofit, you could work in a lot of different fields. So looking at a salary by certain majors is not as helpful as what does it mean to have a consulting salary? What does it mean to work in nonprofit? So salaries really range depending on the student's goals, but you can get good data through that. So in terms of how many students have a job lined up after graduation, it's also incorporated in that assessment, but it's over 75%, I believe, with the most recent data that came out. I'm not remembering the certain percentage offhand, but it's usually pretty high for Georgia Tech students. Again, it's as long as you're engaging and you're networking, you have plenty of opportunities. There's also a proportion of Georgia Tech students that go immediately into either graduate or professional school. So that's something to consider when you look at the overarching percentage, students that have jobs upon graduation, because not everybody's aim is to have jobs. And some students will graduate, and like the instance that I just shared with the professor and his son at Georgia Tech, I don't think the students wanted to consider their job opportunities or really engage in the job search until they graduated, because they were very focused on doing well academically. And he has jobs, he has multiple offers that he's received now. So I don't want you to panic if your student graduates. They can attend our career fairs for however long they like. Alumni are invited to all of our events and can engage in any of our career fairs. So just a couple of thoughts to follow up on that.
That's great. So a question about the why to register perhaps a summer internship. They clarified in a different window. I understand the benefits of registering a co-op, but don't really see the benefits of registering a typical 10 to 12 week internship. And they clarified it, they meant summer internship. So is that necessary?
So good question. And this is where I could really use your partnership on this. So technically, no, they don't have to register it. Again, if I'm just being transparent. However, this can impact their financial aid, and it has impacted students with their scholarships, because again, some of your students, if they pursue a career in computer science, for example, or some engineering fields, they make a lot of money within the summer. And if that increases your overall income past a certain level, students have lost scholarships based on internships that they engaged in. So that's always my biggest fear. It also shows up on your transcript. So that's another way. That's another thing that you can share with your student. And again, selfishly, as the Career Center, we often get questions from faculty, from parents, from students. Who hires, my major? What are the top employers? What are the jobs that they, secure? So the more that we are able to see, who's hiring these students for these internships, we can share this information with your student and with you and give you a better sense of what are the types of opportunities that are out there for me that I may be able to secure. So just a couple of things. You can cancel your housing if it's more than 25 miles away. I'm trying to think. I feel like I'm missing another big one, but those are just a couple of the key things that come to mind.
That's great. The website that you refer to for the salaries for different majors, if you have an opportunity to put that in the chat, I think they would appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And then another question. What are the ways students can search for internships or co-ops? And is it too late now to look for a summer internship? And I guess, is it typical to go along with that? Is it typical for first year students? Does it matter the classification? It's harder for first year students to get an internship versus obviously someone who's got a little bit more experience, like a third year? I think that's important to understand, because I think a lot of first year students feel a lot of pressure to get an internship. And it's harder for them, obviously, than someone who's older.
Sure. Before diving in that question, I wanted to let you all know I dropped a link to the Office of Academic Effectiveness. That's where they publish those career salary surveys, so you can play with the data there. There's some other institute surveys there as well. But in terms of searching for an internship or co-op, here's my advice for you to share with your student. Tell them to search early. In general, the bigger the employer, the earlier they tend to recruit, and that's both for co-ops, internships, and full-time jobs. We find a large number of our employers come in the fall or post their jobs in the fall more so than in the spring. So if your student has a couple of years before they graduate, or they plan on starting a co-op or internship search next year, please encourage them to engage earlier in the fall. It doesn't mean that they can't get a job opportunity later in the year, but some of these top brands, of which many Georgia Tech students are very focused on, they don't come back to recruit in the spring unless if they have a sudden surge in customers or demand for their particular product or service. So it's always better start early and then continue the search and stay active and engaged. So it is not too late to find a summer job or internship, but there are seasons that I think students should be aware of. And in general, it's not a bell curve. It is a very steep peak at the beginning, and then it starts to go down when it comes to college recruiting. So January, February, that's when a lot of our jobs are posted. Again, we will still have jobs coming in, but those are our peak times. And then August, September, a little bit tailing into mid-October are the peak times. But I also always share with students that the world of work does not revolve around college. There's always going to be a new industry that's hiring, somebody retires, leaves a job. You have the ability 24/7, 365 to find a job. The key is, did you prepare for that? Have you had somebody look at your resume? Do you understand how to interview? There may be other factors coming into play that may be holding your student back from ultimately converting that into a job opportunity and getting hired. So again, just a couple of thoughts that on that question.
Thank you. And I think if there's any other questions, again, just feel free to put them in the chat. I think we always get a lot of questions about internships and co-ops because that can be confusing and to know the difference. And then we know from their very first year, students get taught their elevator pitch. They're in GT 1000. They're going. So by the time that their spring rolls around, which is why Georgia Tech students are so competitive, because we really work with them their first year to get them ready so that they are ready for the job market and for society, because we try and get them as well-rounded as we can before they leave us for the world. So is there any last, I don't see any other questions. Laura, are there any other things you wanted to mention or point out?
So two things. I realized I didn't address your question about first-year students and securing a co-op or internship. So my thoughts around that is that please encourage your student to go out and engage, meet employers, but some employers will not hire them until they're in their sophomore or junior year. Again, it just comes down to how much technical knowledge that they've gained that would provide value to that respective organization. There are first-year students that get hired for internships or different work opportunities. Now, in terms of registering a co-op, the absolute earliest they could do it would be the summer after their first year, but that is very rare. So I just want to be clear with that. Your student is not behind in that particular regard. What I encourage first-year students to focus on as kind of that step before the first internship, co-op, whatever that may be, really focus on leadership, focus on student involvement. You can work part-time, you can engage in a research project. You could do something else independently. So never overlook your own power to create your own opportunity. If you really want to work in app development, develop an app, do something to show that you have an interest in that particular field or industry. And working part-time, no, you may not be able to get an internship, at Facebook summer after, your first year necessarily, but could you, work part-time in another social media related organization? So you've got to think about what kind of dips my toe in the water, what may start to show a pattern of interest in a related field or area, even if I'm working part-time, but I'm in the umbrella of finance and I work part-time at a bank. Again, you're starting to show a pattern of interest, and that is what will help that student be more likely to get selected for an interview and hopefully get that role. Now, Martha, you had a question about, is the deadline to register an internship the same deadline as course registration? Yes, so to register co-ops and internships, it is tied to the academic experience. So when phase 1 registration opens, your students are signing up for classes, that's when we work with the student to process their experiential learning forms, where they're sharing with us the co-op or an internship that they secured, and we enroll them into the course. So they don't register for it. All they have to do is submit, number one, their experiential learning application before the placement form. So the experiential learning application is just, they watch a brief video through CareerBuzz that talks about what is a co-op, what's an internship, how do I register it, why is this valuable, all the key things that we're talking about right now. And then they submit that form and we walk them through the process. We've got an excellent team. I do want to let you all know, if you have an international student, we do prioritize international students first, because there are the extra steps that they have to go through in terms of CPT or potentially OPT, to cover these experiences. So just a few things to be aware of. But yes, it's directly during that window.
And Martha, you have a question about research for undergraduate students. I'm going to put a link in the chat for you as well. And I'll drop that office. So it's the office's undergraduate research opportunities. And they work with students to help them find research opportunities on campus with faculty, which is great to have them not only work in the lab per se or do the research, but sometimes the faculty will invite them to go present at a conference, which is a wonderful experience because they're in that group, they're in that area that they're interested in. Networking comes into play with that, and also just the experience of presenting at a large conference. So those are all wonderful things. So definitely, if your student's interested in research, check out the link I just put there. It's urop.gatech.edu. And then there was another question from Laura, who asked, what's the advantage of taking a co-op over an internship and vice versa?
Excellent question. And it kind of depends on your opinion as to which is better. It's more of a preference versus one's better than the other, in my opinion. So a co-op is with one employer. So you get depth of experience versus an internship at multiple different places versus breadth, potentially. So for students that aren't 100% sure if they really want to work in this industry or field, they may feel more inclined to think an internship is better because they could work in different settings, types of employers or industries, versus a student who's really interested in that particular type of work. A co-op may be a really great fit for them because they will have been with the same organization, have a year of experience. And for some employers, I'll say more in technical fields and engineering in particular, they love to see a co-op because you've gained a depth of technical skills that somebody that does, a couple of internships won't have the same amount of experience and skill set to draw upon without having stayed with that one employer. So again, one is not better than another. They're both great. Getting experience, period. But I would say depth versus breadth.
Right. And our students, I think, sometimes want to your point, really just want to figure out where they belong. All right, so doing 3 different internships and doing 3 different areas kind of helps them figure out, oh, that company I thought I wanted to, but now definitely not. So I've had several students come back after the summer and be like, oh no, that was not for me. So that's good experience for them to know as they continue on with their education here at Georgia Tech. So I've dropped Laura's email in the chat. Should you have any additional questions, or you can email us at parents, and I'll put our email there, parents@gatech.edu. If you have any other questions that we'd be happy to answer for you. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the webinar, but thank you again. We are recording this, and I will post this on our website tomorrow, which will just be under Stay Connected Virtual Recordings. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you for our next What's Buzzing at Georgia Tech. Have a great day. Thanks again, Laura.
Thank you all. Great questions.